Hello book lovers and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I will be going through my stats for 2022 as well as seeing if I achieved the goals I set for myself. So for the year 2022, I had created myself a spreadsheet on Excel to keep track of some of the statistics related to the books that I was reading. I have decided to kind of mash together my have I achieved my goals of 2022 with the statistics video just because they do overlap a little bit. So I will go ahead and address those goals as I get to the stats that are relevant to them. Now, this is my first time doing kind of like a screen recording of my computer while talking to you about what I'm looking at. So hopefully everything lines up okay. Have a little patience with me. I'm still relatively new to this whole video editing and video creating aspect of YouTube, but I'm very excited to go through all of those. So we will go ahead and just jump right in. All right, so hopefully that screen is now recording and that you can see it here. Right now I am on my, what is this called? Notion, I believe. And I have my list of goals that I went ahead and put for myself for 2022. So we'll go through those as we go through our stats. So let's go ahead. I moved everything from Excel over onto Google since I had Excel because of school, but of course that is going to expire at some point this year. So I figured I'd move over to Google. That way I don't have to do it later in the year. So here we just have the list of all the books that I read this year. The different colors shows what I read within the month. And then you can also see kind of what I was tracking. Now, I haven't created my Excel spreadsheet for 2023 yet. I was going to do that so I could kind of walk you through it. But honestly, it took me so long to do these stats yesterday that I just was too lazy to do it. But I'll let you know as we go through some of the changes that I'm planning on making. Mostly, I'm just hoping to just kind of compact things together a little bit because right now there's just too much detail and it's just a bit of a pain to fill this out every time I finish a book. But let's go ahead and go to sheet 2. And this is, I haven't filled out the series portion yet, but I will do a separate video where I kind of talk about where I'm at with series and how I did with series throughout the year. Here you can see my star ratings that I gave, how many 5 stars, how many 4 stars, 3 stars, and 3.5 and all that jazz, as well as DNF. So I guess I had DNF 7 books this year, and then I did not rate 6 because I don't read my nonfiction books. Here we see the number of books that I finished each month, the number of pages, number of audiobook hours, and the average rating. And here are the totals. So as you saw on my goal sheet, my goal was to read 80 books this year, which I reached that goal in August, and I ended up completing a total of 131 books. I just realized I'm not wearing earrings. Oh well. As far as pages, I read a total of 29,521 pages. I listened to about 396.96 hours of audiobook, and my average rating was a 3.1975. I was hoping to get at least a 4.0 rating, but unfortunately my December average rating was a little bit below a 4.0, and so I just wasn't able to get over that 3.9 average rating, but still not too terrible. I mean, we had quite a few over 4.0 throughout the year. I think the lowest was, it looks like it was in May with a 3.0 yeah, 3.45 was the lowest rating. So not too terrible. But of course, you know, we always want to have the average rating being high because that means that the majority of the books that we are reading are, you know, a 4 or higher. So definitely hoping that next year that number is higher. And then let's get over to page 3, which has kind of the fun stuff. So let's make this a little bit smaller so that way you can see everything. So I'll talk through the numbers a little bit, or actually let's keep it bigger so that you guys can actually read the numbers. I don't know if you can read those anyway. So I kind of broke this up a little bit by stats. So here we have like character sexuality. My goal was to read at least 50% books that had queer rep in it. Here we see that we read books that had 54% with queer rep. Now, when it comes to any sort of representation, I do want that representation to be a rather prominent part of the story. So if a book had like a teacher or something that was queer, but the rest of the cast was all like straight, or as in a book that I read recently, someone they interviewed was queer, but it was like worth 2 pages of the book, I don't count that as a book that has queer representation in it, even though the author did include, you know, someone that was queer in it. Same goes with like racial diversity. I do want the person to be a rather prominent part of the story before I actually count that as a form of diversity. So we did achieve that goal. Glad to see it. So that was this book, or this goal down here at the bottom. Now we also had read more books with ace characters in it. So let's take a look at that. I mean, this goal wouldn't have been too hard for me to achieve because in 2021 I read maybe 1 book that had ace characters in it. So if we take a look here at ace, we read 11 books that had asexual characters in it. And you can see it here. It's, you know, lower than, you know, bisexual or gay, but there was an improvement from the like 1 that I read in 2021. So that is another goal achieved. Make sure I don't have any other books. Oh, I just realized I was pointing out goal number 7 when it's goal number 4 that had 50% books to have queer rep. I just got distracted by the 50% down there. So there we go. That looks good. Let's pop back over here. So then we jump down to character race. This does have a pie chart here that you can see. Now this doesn't mean that 50%, almost 50% of the book I had only white characters. That just means that at least one of the prominent characters in 50% of the books that I read, or I should say there was at least 1 white prominent character in almost 50% of the books that I read. And then the next highest was East Asian, and then African American or Black. And I don't think I had any goals as far as that, because I think my Indigenous goal had to do with authors, not characters. But yeah, so definitely would like this number to increase a little bit to have a more diverse cast of characters in more of my books. And then, whoops, we're going too far. Then if we take a look at author sexuality and gender, so we saw that primarily most of my authors were white. So I would like that to be at least 50% with diverse characters. So this is at 56%, almost 60%. So that's a little too high for my taste. I would like to go ahead and change that a little bit so that I'm reading more authors that are of non-white origin. And then if we look at the gender, primarily female. I do read primarily female identifying authors. We had a few that were non-binary. I think if we look down here, scooch over so I can actually see it. 9 of the authors I read were non-binary. Now, one that I didn't include here was that 17%, almost 18% of the authors that I read were queer identifying. When it comes to saying that an author is queer, I kind of just look at their biography, either like in the book or in Goodreads, and if it doesn't say anything, I don't really hunt around too much to be like, are you gay? So I just base it off like if they're openly queer, and if not, then I just put them as straight, even if they may not be. They might just not be out. Then if we take and I forgot because I wanted to read more books by Indigenous authors. And we read 4 books in this month that were by Indigenous authors. And I do believe that is technically more than I've read in the past, but it's still a relatively low number. If you see my goals for 2023, I do want to read at least 5. So that is at least 1 more than I read this year. I did read an anthology, so technically I read more than 4 individual authors because that anthology had like 7 or so different authors in it, but I only read 4 full books that were written by Indigenous authors. And then if we pop down here, we don't have a graph for this, but this is just book types. You know, if it's fiction, nonfiction, memoir. My goal was to read 12 nonfictions this year. If you take a look here, I did not achieve that goal. I only read 6. The memoir does count towards the nonfiction. So it's not 7, it's 6, which is only half of what I wanted to read. And I did alter my goal for this year to accommodate the fact that I realize I'm not a very fast nonfiction reader. So I need a couple months at least to get through a nonfiction book. And then when we go through mental health rep, disability rep, I did have a goal where I read 30%, that 30% of my books have these. So 30% disability rep, and 30% mental health rep. And if we take a look here, I did achieve it for mental health rep, reading almost 40% of my books with mental health rep, but I definitely did not achieve it with disability rep, seeing as only 16%. And that's pretty skewed because I believe I read quite a few of the Full Metal Alchemist books, and I believe I did count those all as having disability rep because he has prosthetic limbs. So I won't have that cushion of reading like multiple books in a series with a prominent character with disability. So I'm really gonna need to focus on trying to find more books with disability rep because that number is definitely lower than where I would like it to be. Then if we take a look at our genres, you can see I do read primarily romance here. Contemporary and fantasy and sci-fi are doing pretty well. I think sci-fi really kicked up towards the end of the year because I started reading that genre a little bit more, exploring it and finding that I really enjoy it. When it comes to genres, I kind of put just whatever genre the story falls under. So if I was reading, say, Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, I believe is her name, I would count that as a romance because there's a romance subplot. I would count that as historical because it has a historical setting, and then I would put it under like a mystery thriller story as well. So, you know, I just put it under whatever it applies to. So this is showing what percentage of books had some aspect of that genre presented in them. When it comes to making changes to my spreadsheet next year, I do think I'm going to put thriller, mystery, and horror all together just because there is a lot of crossover between those, and I have them all together on my TBR game anyway. And I totally forgot to mention I was going to make some changes when it came to the race of authors and the characters. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't reading just East Asian authors because that's what I'm primarily drawn to. So I kind of split that continent up as much as possible, which led to North Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, West Asia. And it's too much. So I am just going to make it Asian authors. I am still, of course, going to try and make sure that I'm not just reading East Asian authors, but it's too overly detailed for me to split up that continent, even though it does seem like a good idea because that continent is so huge and so diverse. I'm just simplifying it for myself, but keeping it, the goal in the back of my mind to be reading from all over the continent and not just, Japan or Mandarin inspired stories, or Chinese, I guess. Mandarin is a language. So that's another change, a big one, because it was very annoying this year to go through, and if they're not from Asia, to mark 0000000 through all of that every single time was not the most convenient thing to be doing. So jumping back down past the genres, I do have here romance subgenres. I do think I'm going to go ahead and continue to track that just because I want to see if it shifts at all, what kind of romance I prioritize. As you can see here, contemporary is the one I read the most, and then we have fantasy coming in at second. I have a feeling that fantasy might start increasing throughout the years, but we'll see. I am, a big fan of contemporary romances like Emily Henry, Talia Hibbert, Ali Hazelwood, Tia Williams. Those are 4 authors that I have read from this year that I will definitely continue reading from. And then also when I'm on Kindle Unlimited, I do like a lot of those male romances, contemporary ones that are like companion novels, and so you can read 7 contemporary romances within, one series, and we'll probably continue doing that. So, but yeah, no, I kind of want to get more into historical. I have a bunch of historical paperbacks, mass paperbacks sitting down there waiting for me to read them. So I'm definitely hoping to make my way through some of those this year to see if that's a genre that I'll be reading more of in the future. Next we have age groups, adult, new adult, young adult, middle grade. I guess I did technically read one kid's book when I read the Prince and Knight, but I went ahead and just put that under middle grade because I will hardly ever be reading picture books. But here you see my graph that I do read primarily adult. I was definitely moving away from YA this year. Still enjoy it and will definitely continue to read it. And I actually read a few middle grades this year, 4, which I think is more than usual because I don't read them that often, and that may continue to increase this year, especially since I'm planning on rereading the Warrior series, which is a middle grade book, and I think I also have Howl's Moving Castle as a reread, which is also considered middle grade. So that's already 7 books that are considered middle grade, so I can definitely see that slice of the pie increasing this year. And then we have if the series, or if I was reading series standalones, or if they were part of a companion series. I do split up series and companion series because sometimes I don't complete a companion series because I don't need to. Now for series, I read 54 series or books that were part of a series, but I do read primarily standalones. I was kind of surprised by that. For some reason, I felt like I was reading a lot of series this year. But at the same time, I guess standalones are something that I do read quite often. Companion novels, I'm a little shocked by how low that number is, just because a lot of like romances are considered companion novels. But you know, it is what it is. I guess I am someone who likes to, you know, jump into a world, get to know characters, and then kind of move on with my life. But yeah, so as I get more into like higher sci-fi and fantasy, I can definitely see the number of series that I'm reading increasing through as I go along. So we'll see how that goes along. And then we have where I got the book from, if it was owned TBR, if Kindle Unlimited, or Libby, or the library. I put Libby and library together because Libby is the library. I did have a goal here to read at least 50% of my books from my owned TBR. And as you can see, that did not really work out. I think now that's an unrealistic goal since I started using a Libby this year. I am reading additional books that I usually wouldn't be reading because I am able to listen to them as audiobooks and listen to them while I'm doing other things when usually I wouldn't be reading at that time. So I also got Kindle Unlimited for the first time at the end of 2021. I think I got it maybe in December, a 3-month trial. So that's very new to me as well. So I kind of made this goal before I had Kindle Unlimited or Libby at my fingertips. And nowadays I think it's a pretty good ratio of owned books. I think it is a pretty good ratio of owned books to books that I'm getting in other locations. I do really enjoy using and supporting my library, so I don't really want to decrease that or anything. So I'm pretty happy with those numbers, even though it technically didn't achieve the goal. Then we have type of publication, traditional, indie, sub-pub. I think next year I'll just combine indie and self-published, not sub-pub, self-published. Just because sometimes I struggle to find out if a book is self-published or if it's indie published. I'm not familiar enough with the differences to get into those details. I'm hoping these stats are pretty accurate, but for all I know, some of the self-published might have actually been indie published. Not sure, but you know, as you can see, traditionally published books are almost 3/4 of what I am reading. I would like to read more self-published and indie published books. Of course, I feel like a lot of the books that I hear about that are self-published are the ones that are talked about a lot, and so they're getting picked up. So while I might have heard about them when they were technically self-published or indie published at this point, by the time I finally get around to them, they would be considered like traditionally published. Like I have the Atlas 6, I have the self-published version, but now it's been traditionally published. So when I do finally get around to reading it, I will put it in as a traditionally published book, even though I'm technically reading what is a self-published book. So we'll see. Of course, I would like to read more, you know, self-published books just because I want to support those authors. And I think the more I get into like fantasy romances and like monster romances, things like that, the more that'll happen. And that's kind of the end. We have a few random ones, like keeping track of something is a debut novel. It says here that 25% of the books that I read were debut novels. I'm kind of surprised by that. I'm hoping those stats are correct because I know 1 month I had debut novel as a prompt for my game and I was literally not able to find one on my list. So I don't know, maybe I read a ton of debut novels this year. Also translated, I only read 9 translated books. While I don't think it's a goal of mine to read more, I wouldn't mind if I did because that's a relatively low number. Then as far as rereads go, I had 7 this year. I had a goal of 6 books that I wanted to reread, so that means I read 1 additional reread, so not too shabby. And then new authors, so these are authors that I've never read before. Almost 60% of the authors that I was reading I had never read before. I feel like I don't often read authors that I've previously read unless I'm continuing a series, which is something I want to work on, because obviously if I really enjoyed a book, I want to continue to read books by that author. I've done better with that when it comes to like romances, like I'm Ali Hazelwood, Emily Henry, Talia Hibbert. Those are authors that I'm definitely going back to. But when it comes to other genres, I haven't been doing that well with it unless it's a series. So it's something I definitely want to work on. Of course, I want to keep exploring new authors, but I want to continue to support the ones that I've enjoyed in the past. All right, so those were my stats for the year. I hope you found that at least somewhat interesting. I do like seeing people's stats for the year, so I figured I'd go ahead and share mine. I feel like I did relatively good on my goals, and definitely used my successes and failures to kind of decide what my goals for the next year would be. So hopefully next year I do even better. Let me know down below how many books you read this year, and what goals you had set for yourself and how you did with that. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!